Hello, it's the Reasonably Effective Podcast, and we're up to episode 4 as we're just bringing it big time with these podcasts. I'm Uncommon Fossil and joined by my co-host, always with here each week, 10 Types. So 10 Type, how has your week been going, particularly in the world of Pokemon?
It's been going pretty well. I've been getting back into things. I haven't been playing as much Marvel Snap. I've been playing a lot of
Okay.
Pokemon. As you know, I've been doing some card design analysis, which is pretty fun, and getting the community involved in that as well is pretty cool. And I'm also like working on a lot of videos for that, which is cool. And then I've been playing some cool decks. I think by the time this is out, I'll have released a video on my really interesting Ditto spread deck that I made, and you
Mhm.
tried that as well, right?
Yeah, that was an interesting deck and a tricky deck to play, so people should check out that video for that for sure. And for myself, my week has been kind of a grind in terms of Pokemon. I gotta say, I've been really focusing on prepping my PTCGO account for migrating to live. So I've now used up all my tickets. So for the events, which is, and you sort of spend a lot of time waiting around between rounds on that. And then I think the whole trading economy in PTCGO is really dried up from what I can tell. So I still have a bunch of cards to trade away, just kind of junk random cards. But I want to, because of the dusting system in live, I have extra junk cards. So just get some other junk cards in return. It benefits everybody. So, but because there's not a lot of trades, so I'm just having to make all the trades myself, and it's taking a lot of time, and I'm not particularly been enjoying that aspect lately. Now you're not really prepping for live, correct? You're trying to ignore its existence still.
Yep, yep. And I've been doing that, so it's working. It's working pretty well.
Yep, you can do that for who knows how long, right? We just don't know. But we'll see. Eventually, it might just be you and 5 other people on it. But anyway, enough talk about that. And we certainly don't want to dwell on live this week. We talked about it last week, and everybody can forget about it as long as they haven't migrated yet. So we're gonna do our quiz show, the first part, and we're calling it Trainer or Trader. So we each are going to name a trainer card or a potential trainer card, and the other person has to determine whether it's a real card or not. So is it a trainer or a trader? So we're going to do five cards because this should go pretty quickly. So I'll just get things started here. So is Battle VIP Pass a trainer or a trader?
Oh yeah, that is a real trainer.
Now I said Battle VIP Pass. Correct. So you got that. It is correct. So good job.
Yeah, so you chose an interesting one. I'll do another interesting one. Is Premium Battle Pass a real trainer?
That is a trader.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's trader more ways than one, right? Because that is from live, which you certainly see as a trader to the Pokemon game in general.
Yes, I'm amused by our first two predictions. We did our suggestions. We did not like coordinate this, so that's funny.
No, we did not at all. All right, so second question for you: Pokemon breeders nurturing.
Yeah, that's a real one. That's the evolution supporter, right?
Yes, which is a mouthful to say. So making sure I said it correctly, that was probably the biggest trick of that one. Yeah, search for two evolution of two Pokemon in play. So not a overly played card, I would say.
Yeah, I played it in I think a Gardevoir deck, but it's not that good. But I'll move on to
Yep.
my second one, and is our Crushing Gloves. Is that a real card?
Crushing gloves. Yeah. Okay. The gloves. There's a lot of gloves out there, and they don't get a lot of play. And I certainly haven't played much of them, nor do we have seen much. I don't. I think no. Crushing gloves is not a real card. It's a trader.
No, it is a
Is that
real
what it's
one.
called? Crushing. Okay.
Yeah, it's more to metal. I'm not really
To
sure why it's called that.
metal.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, but okay. There you go. All right, got me with that one. So, I've got here rescue trolley.
No, that's a trader. It's supposed to be rescue carrier, right?
Correct. Yep. Good job. And early on, we both miscalled it that for a while. I think because obviously the cards come out in Japanese first, and then individuals translate them, but they're not always the translation that Pokemon chooses. So I think Rescue Trolley was how it was presented initially on one of the major channels.
Yeah, I was thinking that sounded familiar.
Yep.
So now to my next one is Candace, a real card.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's the supporter
What's
that
it?
searches for like water. Or you look at the top seven, you get like
Hmm.
water, like Pokemon and energy or something. It's not very good, but yeah, it's
Oh,
real.
yeah, top 7 any water, Pokemon, or energy cards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of trainers to choose from that don't see a lot of play. So, gonna throw one at you here. Primordial Altar.
Yeah, that's a real trainer. That's the stadium. I think it's from Crown Zenith that you like discard the top card of your deck.
It's Silver Tempest, I
Oh,
believe.
Silver Tempest.
But
Okay.
yes, each player can look at the top card of the deck, and they may discard it if they choose, but you don't have to. Which
Yeah,
I
okay.
see some play. I've
Wait, it does?
I've gone against people playing it. I don't remember um, with some decks that want to get things in the discard pile. If I don't remember what it was, so
Yeah. It seems like worse than Pokestop.
yeah, I mean it protects you if there's certain things that you can't afford to ever discard, then it gives you protection from that. So I'm not sure. It's always usable by your opponent though, because you at least see the next card. So whereas Pokestop, your opponent doesn't initially want to use it. So it doesn't seem like the best choice.
Yeah. Um, but so I'll go with my fourth one now. Team Yellhorn.
All right, the yells. Yeah, okay, so there's Team Yell Horn. There's Team Yell Towel, right? Or is it Yell Towel? I was trying to remember. I was looking at those. They get a little tricky with the yells and the teams. So Team Yellhorn, you said, correct?
Yeah.
Is it just Yellhorn or is it Team Yellhorn? Um, I'm going to say true. There's a trainer. Did I get that
No,
one
it is.
wrong?
No,
It's
it's
just
yeah,
it's
it's
just
Yellhorn.
Yellhorn.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yellhorn's the only one like it.
Isn't there a Team Yell card though? Yeah. Team Yell's Cheer.
Team Yell's Cheer, Team Yell
Grunt.
Grunt, Team Yell Towel all have Team Yell. Yellhorn's the one that does not have it.
Okay. I was concerned about that. So that was a good ask there for sure.
Yeah.
So the last one for me is heat resistant gloves. So I'm going with one of the gloves also.
Oh, that one's no, it's fire resistant gloves, right?
Yep, you got it. Yep, fire resistant gloves. So
Yeah, I was
good
I was
job.
looking at the gloves. Sorry, I was thinking about that one.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because their names and their we don't see them a lot, but there's a number to choose from, so it was a logical place to go. And what's your
Yep.
last one?
My last one is Single Strike Scroll of the Fanged Dragon.
Single straw, single scroll. What? You repeat that one? Strike.
Single Strike Scroll of the Fanged Dragon.
I don't believe that's correct, so I'm going to say fiction or
But
traitor.
yeah, no, it is real. It is
It is.
Single Strike
Oh, is that
Scroll.
one of it? Is I was. Oh, I thought it was close, but you switched one. Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't flow off the tongue, does it? That name.
No, with this attack, super strong slash for 5 energy, dealing
Mm.
300 damage and discarding all the energy.
It does how much? What? How much damage?
300 for fighting metal, colorless. Then you
Fighting
discard all
metal.
the energy. It's really bad.
So this is what you're. But to see, this is what I think your idea is post rotation with the Lugia Archeops, and was it Deoxys that's all three types,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you
And then
do.
you can do all these scrolls, and this is what I think you're planning on taking over with post rotation, with cards like that. But
Yeah.
all right, well, good job. You got me on a number of those. So there are a lot of trainers that we just don't see play, and I would, for good reason, I think we would all say. So we're moving on to our reasonably effective deck of the day or card of the day, and we're going to talk themed because themed is now kind of on. The clock is counting down as to how long we can play themed. Whenever Pokemon TCGO sunsets, themed is going to go away outside of, I guess you could play it and expand it and just get crushed by your opponents, but it's not really going to be viable, or special events that do it, but you're not going to be able to play on a regular basis. So, good looking for a reasonably effective theme deck and want to talk about the Zamazenta theme deck, which is, I think it's the best metal deck for themed, because obviously themed is a big part of the lives of budget players, because you gotta it's a way to get through your daily challenges if you don't have a top tier standard deck, which can be expensive. So it is so I'll just briefly say, so Zama's it's named after Zamazenta, which and this is from Rebel Clash. It has 2 attacks on that. Guard Press does 30 damage, and you take 20 less, so it's useful. And then for 120, Power Rush does 120 for 3 energy. But then you flip a coin. If it's tails, you can't attack. So it's that's a big price to pay not being able to attack. It's got a number of other good cards, but then really the biggest card is Corviknight, the stage 2. Perhaps they should have named it after that, but because that's really the one you attack with for the most part. It has Iron Wings, does 130 damage, which is okay, but not great for a stage 2. But then you can discard 2 energy, and then it takes 100 less damage the next turn. So it's almost impossible to get one shot at that point. It's weak to lightning, which while isn't always isn't the best weakness, it's the one Pokemon that's not weak to fire. So it gives you a chance against fire decks, which are certainly big in the format. So what are some thoughts of you on this deck?
Yeah, so obviously Corviknight's really good. One of the issues is you discard 2 energy, so you need to make sure you have extra. It does play Metal Saucer, which surprisingly isn't that good in this deck because you don't have consistent discard or switching. But still,
and it only has 2 metal.
benefit.
It only has 2 Metal Saucer, whereas if you're building the deck, you'd certainly put 4 in.
Yeah, yeah. But then the Corviknight's very strong. But I think we need to talk about the Zamazenta itself, because you don't like this very much, do you?
No, I don't. I mean, I like the deck. It's certainly my go-to metal theme deck, but I usually avoid Zamazenta. And it's a retreat cost of 2, so if it's there and you flip tails, it's not a happy feeling. But you like it more than I do, I think.
Yeah, I think its first attack guard press is really nice. So when you're looking at damage thresholds in themed, one of the big ones is 120 or 130. So obviously, if you don't, you just get KO'd by 120 or 130. But then you can use guard press. 30 for 2 isn't bad. It's a nice poke. And in the early game, if you start this, you can definitely get this powered up. You won't get KO'd before you power it up, unless something absurd happens, like your opponent gets like a turn 2 Charmeleon in this Charizard deck or something like that. But realistically, you can get guard press up, and then you're taking less damage. And now your opponent's gonna pretty much not be able to one-shot you at all. And this means if you guard press into something, they don't KO you, and then you can go in for Power Rush to KO. But you can also just sit there and hide behind a Zamazenta, repeatedly using guard press while you set up like a Corviknight. And I think a Zamazenta provides a lot of value as like a nice wall. Not as much obviously as Corviknight, but I think it's pretty nice defensively. And you also have Potion in this list to be able to heal off even more. So you can tank a lot with this. And it just provides some solid pressures like a poke style Pokemon.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the value. I probably should consider it more than I do. I will say though, with Potion, I probably am looking to heal off maybe the Corviknight if that helps, or one of my other Pokemon. Because I know I like the Ferrothorn more than you do in the deck. I think we've talked about it. You don't like it that much, but it's a stage 1. It has 2 attacks, 1 for 1 energy, triple smash, flip 3 coins, does 30 per heads, which isn't bad. Now, obviously, the flipping just makes it very unpredictable, but it's not bad. If you have a Pokemon knocked out and you don't have anything set up to attack with, you can put this out there with 1 energy and should be able to get some damage. And if you get lucky, you'll get a knockout. But then the second attack, Energy Slap, does 100 damage, and it gives you the option to move all energy from this Pokemon to one you're benched. And I like to use it, Energy Slap, take a knockout, and then move the energy to my Corviknight as a way to get all of a sudden you've powered it up, and now you can have probably 2 or 3 turns where you're discarding energy from Corviknight, and that really, I think, puts me in a good place in the game.
Yeah, obviously, so you said I don't like this one as much.
Right.
A big part of that is because one, as you said, Triple Smash is inconsistent.
Yeah.
Triple Smash is pretty solid, but it's not amazing. An average of 45 damage per 1 energy, and the stage 1's nice, but not amazing. But then Energy Slap, which is like the big payoff attack, it doesn't do that much. And then moving the energy off is nice if they're going to KO you, but they can always just not KO you, and oftentimes they do that. And Zamazenta isn't exactly a setup deck because most of the Pokemon don't need big combo pieces, except for Corviknight, which wants a bunch of energy. but usually your opponent gains more from having the extra time to set up, I find.
Mm.
Like if you're against a deck like say Dragonite, they're just gonna set up their whole board, and you can't really like if both of you are perfectly set up. I think Soaring Storm will probably win. If you have like a ton of energy on Corviknight, that's really good. But
Hmm.
I feel like Ferrothorn doesn't like it's not bad, but I don't think it's like amazing by any means.
Yeah, well, I mean, like when you say Soaring Storm, that's probably the top deck, and this is not at that level. I agree. Now, a couple things with Ferrothorn. I don't mind the triple smash because there's times in the middle of the game where you do some damage and you have a turn like that. But with the energy slap, I usually don't want to do that unless I have another energy in hand that if they don't knock me out, I can hit into them again. And like you said, sometimes you don't get the knockout, so therefore if you're like 20 short, which is common, right? Like 120 is an important number. You just need one head out of three on a triple smash, you'll probably get it. So it's not that bad. But it has this downside. But then the other attacker, which is one I really like to prioritize and do it early if possible, is the Bisharp, which has the first attack is the main one. It's a stage one, has 120 HP. It's weak to fire, and that really is one of the big problems with the deck is fire is so strong. But it has charge order. It does 30 plus 30 more damage for each benched pawn yard that you have. So one energy, and if you have two pawn yards on your bench, you're doing 90 for one energy, which is a very nice attack, a nice payoff you get. And you have to get the right cards, but it's not always that hard to set up. So
Yeah.
that's if it falls to that early, that you put yourself in a good spot in the game.
Yeah, and you only have three Poniards in the deck, which isn't great.
Right.
Often like it's not crazy uncommon to sacrifice a Poniard in the early game
Hmm.
because it just you don't really want to sacrifice your really good payoff Pokemon, so you often sacrifice that, and then you're just not going to be able to hit as much with Bisharp. It's very good. 90 for three is good. Even 60 or sorry, 90 for one is good. 60 for one still pretty good. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. It's just not amazing though. Also against I think I don't know, it's just not a Pokemon that's particularly great. I don't think. I think what you're looking for in this deck, the deck as a whole lacks, is a Pokemon that can do big damage, and so Bishop's pretty good. I think it's better than Ferrothorn, definitely. Um, but it doesn't like hit that hard. It's not that tanky, so it's
No, it's
good for
not.
poke in the early game if your opponent like
Hmm.
doesn't get set up. As soon as they get much like many things going, it's bad. And also in terms of typing, which I guess applies to pretty much the whole deck. Obviously bad against fire, but also really
Yep.
bad against lightning because obviously they can hit your Corviknight for weakness, but probably more importantly, they resist metal generally, so that's pretty bad. And then all
Yeah,
these like
that's.
weak attackers just are doing almost nothing. So
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. Against lightning Pokemon, in some ways, it can feel worse than fire. But then the other Pokemon, which in the deck, which is very useful, I like it a lot, is Duraludon. 130 HP, so therefore it's 10 more than the 120, and that's meaningful. A lot of times they can't one shot you. And especially the first attacks, the main one I use, does 30 damage, a little poke, but then you accelerate you put in energy from the discard on any of your Pokemon, which you can accelerate to itself or any of your others, often a Corviknight if that's where you are in the game. So you don't want to attack. You want to save Duraludon until at least get some energy in the discard, but it's useful. And then the Power Beam does 110, and like you said, three energy. It's underpowered like a lot of them, right? For three energy, you'd like to have it get up to 120, which is why I think the Metal Sharpener is probably the better attack more often on it. It's a very useful card in the deck, I think.
Yeah, it has a lot of value. And it's also probably the best. I mean, almost definitely the best one for standard, because I actually saw standard play. But yeah, I think like Power Beam's okay as well. 110's not horrible, and
No.
after Metal Sharpener, like Power Beam does enough, so it's not that bad, but it's not great either. It's like in some senses it's very similar to Zamazenta where they both have a poke attack and then a big attack and they're
Mm-hmm.
somewhat tanky. Um, I think Zamazenta's possibly more. I don't know. The Duraludon might be better, but they provide like the same thing. Duraludon's not as good for like stalling in the early game. So that's why I feel like Duraludon, if you start off badly, Duraludon's not going to save you. Versus something like Zamazenta can save you. But like you like Duraludon much more than Zamazenta, right?
I do, yeah. I'm not a big Zamazenta fan. I think Duraludon is a key piece somewhere in the middle of the game, getting usually your Corviknight set up. Like you've got enough, you've got a Corvisquire or maybe a Corviknight. You've done some damage and you got some energy, and attacking with a Duraludon or two in the middle is good. And you do have some switch cards, so there's times like you might attack with Zamazenta, you flip tails, you swing into a Duraludon and kind of set things up too. But to me, I find a lot more value in the Pawniard, in the Ferrothorn. The Pharaoh Seed, that's the Pokemon I sacrifice early game when I have the opportunity. When if I have to sacrifice something, that's which I think has the least amount of value of any of the cards long term.
Yeah, that's definitely true, but like it also has a 2 or 3 cost, so that's one of the things your opponent will just leave in the active. They're just sitting there very sad, and then you evolve into Ferrothorn and you flip triple tails, and then you're still very sad. So
Well, I just don't flip tails, so that's just about being a better player there. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. But you're flipping with triple smash. You're averaging 45, so that's not bad if you're stuck there, right? There's worse things than that.
yeah, it's definitely not horrible. I mean, Ferrothorn provides value. I think it's definitely the worst like line in the deck
Yeah, I
because
would agree,
the
probably.
deck overall is pretty solid. Um,
And the
I,
trainers are pretty good. We definitely should talk about them. I think it's got 18 metal energy, which is a fairly heavy amount, right? We've mentioned some. We mentioned Metal Saucer, which is a terrific card. Part of why, and you said it isn't as good as this deck, and I agree. Like I said, partly there's only two. You'd want four, but then the other issue, which is probably the bigger one, is until the Rookidee and Corvisquire are not metal; they're colorless. So you can't. You'd like to accelerate at the beginning to like a Rookidee or Corvisquire to be getting energy for when it evolves to Corviknight, and you can't do that. So that's one downside to Metal Saucer with this deck too.
yeah, I definitely think that's true, and then the lack of switch as well. I think that's Metal Saucer like is such a good card. I think it's pretty clearly the best card in this deck, other than like research. But it's like it honestly doesn't. It feels okay to draw,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't feel that good because you can't get energy in the discard consistently as well. So
Right,
it's
there's no
kind of
train. Right, the Pokemon draw is PokeKid, which is useful. Obviously, it uses your supporter for the turn, but certainly to help get your Corviknight up, having the ability to target that is important. Certainly, like Incense would be a better card, but has use. And then you have Great Ball, which is two of those, which is just a random search, which isn't great. Certainly, like Quick Ball would be better, so you could discard some energy. You have no way to control the energy discard other than research with this deck. So you got two switch. Obviously, more would be good. You got a full 4 line of pop, which just not the greatest thing. It's got two research. That's one of the nice things with the newer decks. They play Professor's Research, so getting two of those is nice. And
yeah.
then
I'd probably rather have Cynthia though than research.
yeah,
I think it
especially with this deck, because like if you have to research away a Corviknight and there's no recovery for Pokemon, it's not a good feeling.
yeah. So I'd say the newer decks aren't better then because the older decks like all play Cynthia and the new decks all play research. So I think
Well, I think
the
that,
older ones are probably better.
but the Charizard deck, I think that has Rod, ordinary Rod, correct? So you can get recover, hopefully.
Yeah, that one has Rod, but you also have like the Battle Sense Charizard. So then you like
Yeah.
discard cards and then you need to Rod that stuff back. It's kind of awkward.
Yeah. I think yeah. I mean, I think in the Rillaboom, I think I like researching that deck, but otherwise, I don't. You're right. Cynthia's probably better for theme deck, and I think as I'm thinking back, as new players, one of the things I had to get over, and I think most people do, is the value of discarding cards. Right, when you play a research early on, it feels bad to discard, and part of what
Yeah.
that gets reinforced is because in the theme decks that have it, it's not overly effective. The research in it, you'd rather have Cynthia in these decks. So
Yeah, I mean, I think like research is still good in the deck. Like, I
yeah,
think it's still like the best support. I wouldn't play research every turn, but like it's still like better than all the we have Pokekid, which is also pretty. I think Pokekid and Sonia provide solid value as well.
yeah,
Most notably Pokekid. But then like research is also very good. And I think that it enforces okay values. Like some people just don't like ever research away like moderately okay hands when you
Hmm.
definitely should, because it like gives you the potential to draw into better stuff. Um,
Yes.
but like PokeKid gives like, and I guess this is another thing to talk about with theme decks is obviously like teaching the player, and
Hmm.
PokeKid teaches like that search is good, which it is, even though it's in a supporter and it's usually should be on an item. Teaching search is good is still good.
Right. I mean, right. Like in terms of standard play, PokeKid, you really would never play that because there's items that do almost the same thing, which are much better. Research obviously is in standard decks, and Sonya was in some standard decks. Those were like the main ones there. And Metal
And
Saucer,
also, yeah,
and yeah, right,
and
Saucer,
switch.
and right, yeah, Switch. Yeah, I kind
And
of
Great Ball as well. Great Ball sees some play. And Potion sees play.
Potion limited. I like
Yeah,
Great
no.
Ball more than you do. There's decks where it works. You don't like those type of decks. It works in decks that are built towards randomness and see what you got and deal with it, which you don't like much. But
Yeah.
um, and switches like everybody has a million switches, so I don't really count switches. You know what I'm saying? Switches are you
Yeah.
find them everywhere. But yeah,
Well, but I'm saying like in terms of teaching the player,
mm-hmm,
Switch provides like helps, especially in this deck. I think Switch actually provides a lot of value in this deck.
yeah,
Unlike most theme decks where you playing like Switch isn't very necessary, but
right,
like this deck has a lot of Pokemon with high retreat cost, and conserving your energy is very important, so you can build up
mm-hmm,
to the big Corviknight. And I think what this deck's actually, it's not super hard to play, but it's not the easiest either because you can definitely commit energy to the wrong Pokemon, and that can like seriously, that can just cost you the game if you make a small mistake where you attach the energy turn one, then that can like hurt you.
yeah. I think right in terms of learning the game and playing a smart game. I think this is certainly a good deck for that. It's not a low skill level deck. There's harder ones probably too, but trying to not put yourself in the spot where Zamazenta, and if you flip tails, you lose the game. You need to have a plan that avoids that situation. When say accelerating with Duraludon's useful, when to accelerate to Duraludon versus the benched and such, and when to push with it. You have enough options in the deck. Really you can attack right with every card I think in this deck, which is uncommon for theme decks. So that makes it a
Like
little
being good to attack with, not like able to attack, right?
right. That there's a place where you want to use the attack. And there are damage attacks, unlike say Soaring Storm with Grimer, which you attack with, but obviously you never really want to be attacking for damage with it.
Yeah. You also talked about the pre-evolutions and just like the final evolutions.
With what?
You said you want to attack with all the Pokemon. Like I don't
Oh
ever
no, I mean the
want
final
to attack with
evolutions.
like,
Correct. You don't want
okay,
to
yeah,
attack with the pre-evolutions of really any of them. That
yeah.
that's
They're okay. They're not like complete garbage though, so they're okay.
they're okay, but the final evolutions are much better in all cases,
Yeah.
right? I don't think I don't think that's a big negative for the deck because that's relatively common for Pokemon in general. Um,
Yeah, yeah. The one game I almost had to attack with like a Curlia, but that's not that common.
yeah, so I'm not, as I'm trying to think quickly. Are there other theme? There's probably not many theme decks where you're happy attacking with every Pokemon in the deck, right? Obviously, there's
Um,
situationally, there's times some are better than others, but usually
I'm trying to think. Like well, like a lot are like have set up attackers, but you still want to attack with them. I'm
hmm
thinking something like, for example, Stormcaller. Right? You're probably fine attacking with everything in that. You got the setup colorless ones. You got Raikou, which obviously you only want to attack with later, but
hmm
and like the other lines are all very good.
yeah. I mean, this one there's a potential for attacking for damage with all of them, which
Yeah.
which I guess that might be. It's certainly unusual, I would say.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's one of those decks, and this is I guess why you like it. And it's an interesting deck because you just go with what you got because
Hmm.
nothing here is amazing except for Corviknight. I think Corviknight's very good, but the
Yeah.
rest are all like just like pretty good, and they don't feel horrible to use, and that's what makes this interesting. That's what makes it reasonably effective.
hmm
It's rare that you'll have a game where you just can't do anything because you should always have something, especially with Pokekins. Like Sonya actually has a lot of good value in this deck because you can get Zamazenta or Duraludon, which both provide good value.
Yeah.
And then obviously you can help set up as well.
Yeah, what the deck lacks, based on your comments, is it doesn't have any setup Pokemon, right? They're all kind of attackers. Duraludon with the acceleration helps you set up another turn, but it doesn't have anything to draw, get get the things in your hands. So that the deck's a little bit. You're at the mercies of fate with what you draw, what you're top decking to a certain extent with the deck.
Yeah, it has a how many supporters? It has 12 supporters though, so it's not that bad. But you
Yeah,
should generally have at least one support to get something going. I think that's why this deck's like pretty all right. And Great Ball also provides solid value because you're okay with getting a wide variety of targets.
yeah. I mean, it's a reasonable effective deck, and honestly, if fire wasn't so strong, it would be, I think, a pretty good deck. That's kind of my thoughts. I think the deck is pretty good. The problem is fire. It's now the meta is stopped developing a long time ago. So really, fire is some of the strongest decks. And as you said, lightning really causes trouble for Corviknight because it resists you and hits you for weakness too. So the typing is not good, and that holds the deck back a lot, I think.
Yeah, it's only like good matchups are like it resists grass, which is very good. If you play this against Rillaboom,
Yep, you're in
you're
good
probably
shape.
gonna win.
Hmm.
Um, but then other stuff like it doesn't really hit anything for weakness that I can think of. Um,
Yeah, I was just trying to think
yeah.
that I don't. There's not. Yeah, I'm not sure. There's really anything meaningful. There's the water deck that came out, the later water deck, right? Has some.
yeah, Glandar Manitan, I guess it hits for weakness. But it's just so like that doesn't seem that much. Like I mean, it's
No,
also
there's better water. You see it
yeah,
sometimes, but there's better choices for water.
yeah. But I think that's it for this deck, right? There's not like too
Yeah.
much to say. And actually, play. You said 18 energies a lot for like a deck. It is, but for themed, it's not that much. Probably on the low end.
Is it on the low end? Okay.
Yeah, it's usually around 20.
I
I mean,
guess
it may be average, but it's like
it, you,
it's not that high,
okay.
certainly.
Yeah, it certainly this is. I don't think I've ever run out of energy with this deck, so it's more energy probably than the deck needs.
Yeah, that's true. That's pretty much true with every theme deck except for maybe like
Soaring
Rillaboom,
and Soaring Storm with all the discarding.
maybe, and also Relentless Flame as well.
Yeah, but so like I said, I think so. It's a reasonably effective deck. The best choice for if you have any metal challenges, it's my go-to deck. It does all the things. It evolves. It hits for damage. It takes knockouts. So it's a good choice there.
Yeah, I think one other thing is that comparing this to Zacian, like you never see Zacian almost ever.
Yeah.
Zacian's not that much worse than Zamazenta, just like a tiny bit worse than the deck. But I'll pull it up here quickly, I guess.
Hmm.
If you're watching on audio or just listening, obviously you don't see it. But like this actually seems more like a normal deck. There are some bad lines. Galarian Psycho is horrible. There's a set of Pokemon. There's like different type. It's just way different. It's not
Hmm.
significantly worse for metal challenges as well. And it's a weaker deck overall. Like, oh, it plays Pokemon Cash, right? Like I like don't play this deck.
Right, Pokemon
So
Catcher, which is a nice card to have, obviously.
yeah. And then you have the Unfazant or however you say that, which is very similar to Corviknight, but it's like one, it's not metal, and two, it's a bit. I don't know. I'd argue it might be about as good as Corviknight, but it's just like interesting to see the contrast where like no one plays this deck. Everyone plays Zamazenta.
Right, I mean, Unfezant, I'm looking at it. It does more damage at 150, but you discard an energy. You have to discard energy, and you don't get the tankiness. So therefore,
Well, like the first attack's good though.
it is.
Yeah,
It,
50. You do
yep.
50. You take 50 less. It's very like stable. And then P Dove as well. Like you have P Dove for setup to get the rest of your line. It searches out like your whole line, and you have like Halucha, which also like sets off and stuff like that. This is a much more like unique deck. But no one plays it because it's just worse.
Yeah, it's just a little worse across the board, I think. So, yeah, and so Zacian probably not quite as good. It does 30. It accelerates an energy to itself, which is good as long as you're not knocked out, of course. And then you flip on the big attack, and you can attack the next turn, but you have to discard 2 energy if it's tail, so you're back to your first attack the next turn, assuming you survive. So
Yeah, it's Zacian's a bit worse. The deck doesn't like Zacian doesn't have that tankiness of Zamazenta, so I think that's what holds it back.
yeah, Yeah, so yeah, I mean, yeah, Zacian's probably just a little worse, but you have Zamazenta there, so why go? Why not just play But why not just play Zamazenta?
Yeah, but I think it's time to move into our final segment
Yep.
here, where we're looking at, I guess, two sets or two mechanics,
Right.
that are both in standard right now. It came out like around a year apart. The Lost Zone mechanic from Lost Origin, and the Fusion Strike mechanic from Fusion Strike. And well, tell us how they're like similar.
Right. I mean, they're each a mechanic with a set of cards. They each really came out, I think, within one expansion in basically their entireties. So that makes them kind of similar. Obviously, Fusion Strike is a battle style, so it relates to Rapid and Single Strike, although it was much delayed from that, so I don't really think of them as related, I gotta say. Just it works so differently. Um, so that's good.
Fusion Strike was like the one set pretty much. Then Battle Styles were the whole year. Um,
Yep.
except they kind of like the Rapid Strike and Single Strike like toned down as it like went on. So
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, but there are two packages. Oh, there's like a package for each. There's the Fusion Strike package, which is UV Max and
Yep.
Genesect
Mm-hmm.
and some other stuff. And then um there's also the Lost Zone package, which is Comfy, Close Experiment, Cramorant, Sableye, and Mirage Gate. And the two of them are like, well, you don't think they're equal, right?
I think I've been critical of Fusion Strike when we've talked about it. Obviously, Mew's very good, so I'm not trying to say it's a bad deck. I think the fact it's such a strong package. I wish they hadn't have released it at once. I wish they had kind of released part of it so people could mess around with it and then get it better over time. I think it would have made the game more interesting rather than Mew being so dominant from the start. And with Fusion Strike, it's really there's pretty much just one way to play it. You have Mew, you have Genesect, and you pick a few of the Fusion Strike pieces that you put in. And there's a number of other Fusion Strike cards, but they just get ignored because they don't make the deck better. It's really a one, it's a one trick pony. It's just one deck with Fusion Strike, in contrast to Lost Zone, which it opens up to a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, I think and one thing to keep in mind about both of them is they're both very good. So
Mm-hmm.
as soon as they came out, they were like best deck in format, which is actually true about like every set, which is kind of silly because I got a comment on one of my videos. They were like, I don't like when Pokemon makes cards that are like good for the next set and then they're immediately bad after. And I understand that and I completely agree with that. Except I said and I replied to this person, I said, yeah, that's true. But a big part of that is the community because they just like ditch a card after it's been out for like a set and then they never play it again and then they're like, yo, this is
Right.
so bad when it's still like just as good as it was. Something like Arceus right now, which honestly it's still seeing play, but Arceus, Palkia, they're still very good. Some of the best decks in the game, but people are just choosing not to play them because they want to chase the new deck, which is like Lugia or whatever. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind here.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely true. People are excited about the new thing, and they just ignore whatever was there before. So, I mean, obviously, now Mew is certainly still seeing play, and it's still very good. And Lost Zone, I imagine, is going to see play for a while too. But yes, people like the new thing, so they quickly move away from it. Now, like I think with Fusion Strike in particular, it all came out in one set. I think there might be one or two cards that came later. I'm not sure, but basically, it's not really developing. Whereas Lost Zone, while yes, there's not more Lost Zone cards, I don't think per se. It's so flexible, right? So it fits in with other new cards as they develop, as they come out better. So it's got more life and more development in Lost Zone naturally, I think.
Yeah, I think there are a few things to say about that.
Yep.
One, Mew has developed a little bit,
Hmm.
notably moving. Well, first it started off playing Psychic Energy, and now it plays um, Fusion Strike like Meloetta, and then it like at
Hmm.
first they didn't play the Meloetta, but they just
Right.
played Psychic, and they still played Fusion Energy, but then they leaned more into Fusion Energy with Meloetta, and then they went into Double Turbo Energy, and that was interesting. It did come out later, but people
Hmm.
weren't trying that. even when it was out. So it has had some development, not a ton.
Yeah, no, you're right. No, you're right. People played it one way, then they realized, oh wait, Meloetta is good. Then they decided to go away from Meloetta. Kind of Meloetta is probably back for a large part of it, and obviously like the Forest Seal Stone makes the deck better too. So it can add pieces in, but it's still within all around the Mew Genesect. That's the framework, and everything else just kind of fits around it.
Yeah, unlike the Lost Zone, which is obviously you need Comfy, you need Colossus Experiment, but then you can
Yeah.
go a few different ways. You probably always play Cramorant just because it's a good card, but
Hmm.
it's not like your deck's a Cramorant deck. You probably play Sableye, but you don't have to. And then you can either choose to play, you can play Mirage Gate, which is good. It's
Hmm.
it's very good. And a bit overpowered, but it opens up
Yes.
a bunch of opportunities. Unlike the Mew engine, which is the engine of the Mew VMAX deck is Genesect, and Genesect does not give any options. Pretty much, it just says so. It's draw. I don't remember the exact phrasing of the ability, but for each Fusion Strike and Pokemon you have in play, you draw until you have that many cards in
Until
play. So if you have
right.
like 5 Fusion Strike Pokemon in play, you draw till 5. You can do that for each Genesect. That means you want 6 Fusion Strike Pokemon in play, so you can draw till 6 4 times a turn. So you draw half your deck on the first turn of the game, which is
Yeah.
just absurd. Um, but then you really don't want to play any non-Fusion Strike Pokemon. I think the only
Hmm.
one that's really seen played is Pumpkaboo, right? In that deck.
Pump Kaboo. Sometimes they'll throw in a counter card occasionally
Oh
too.
yeah, like Drapion I've seen.
Yeah, but those are cards you only want to play situationally because, like you said, you want to fill up your bench with Fusion Strike cards. So it really is forcing you, not quite to the degree that Eternatus forces you to play Dark Pokemon because you can't play anything else at all. But it's pretty similar with Mew. You want all Fusion Strike cards basically.
Yeah, and also I think so they both would you agree with me when I say both of them are a bit overpowered?
Yeah, I mean, when Mew came out, it was very dominant. It didn't win everything, which is part of what's good too. People can beat it. Now, obviously, with Mew, because you're attacking primarily with one card, Mew VMAX, it's got one weakness. You can counter it much easier. Fusions, the Lost Zone, you have more options. It's a little harder to counter in that regard. Um, but yes, it's very good for sure.
Yeah, I think one thing about Mew we've seen it's one of, if not the number one card that's seen the most counters printed.
Hmm.
Notably, the biggest counters, of course, Drapion V, which just one shots Mew.
Yeah.
And then also Myena, which also just kind of one shots Mew. Although it does one shot, I think Dragapult as well for free, which is pretty absurd that it just one shots it for free, which is really good. One Drapion usually teched into a deck beats Mew. Some people say that that's not enough, but it probably is as long as your deck's somewhat decent and you can like KO like a VMAX over 3 turns or something, then teching in one Drapion's good enough. Um, and then like Lost Box hasn't seen any direct counters, especially no. Well, okay, it's only been out for like a set, but
Yeah.
I don't know. We haven't seen any severe counters, and I don't think we are going to because it's starting the next block. So I don't expect us to see.
Right. Well, it had the one counter early on, right, with the Empoleon V, right?
Well, yeah, that
That
didn't come
but
out after though. It came
came
out
out
before.
with was it before
No, yeah, it came out in
or
in
with
Battle
it?
Styles.
Okay. I don't. I mean,
So much earlier. It was like well over a year earlier. But Empoleon V started to see play only when um
right when
the
the
Lost Box.
Lost Zone came out. So that was the one counter, and even that didn't stick around that long because it wasn't overly effective, or there are probably better ways to beat the deck. So, but yeah, Lost Zone hasn't been around as much, so the counters aren't quite as developed. Now, also, obviously, we have Lugia Archeops, so that's its own beast that's very dominant too. So, you have the Lugia decks, you have Lost Zone decks, and you have Mew decks. That's a lot of the top decks there, and they all can win on their own, right? They don't have to be scared of the other decks necessarily. They can win games for the most part on the strength of the deck itself.
Yeah, that's one thing that makes them different. A lot of, I mean, I guess most sets have a card that like is good on its own right, but
Hmm.
I think like Lost Zone's just so good. But I think Lost Zone because we're talking about like the design, and I've been talking about design on my
Yep.
channel as well. Um, like, and I've actually talked about UV Max, I believe, and I also talked about Colossus Experiment,
Hmm.
a big part of the Lost Zone engine. And I think why the Lost Zone stuff is so good, it's so interesting because a lot of the decision making process is really interesting. Um, in because you like play Colossus Experiment or Comfy, and you look at 2 or 5 cards, you need to
Hmm.
get rid of some permanently. And the Lost Zone is an interesting mechanic. Fusion Strike isn't really an interesting mechanic. It's just some words slapped on a piece of paper. I mean, I guess that's the whole game,
I guess
but
Lost Zone's the same thing in that sense too, right?
but it's like it actually has an effect. The fact that it's a Pokemon's Fusion Strike doesn't really mean much, but like Lost Zones, it's a unique mechanic that acts differently than the discard pile or the draw or in play. It's very different. So I think that's really interesting. But I think and then you need to decide like what you want to get rid of and keep. There are a lot of interesting decisions.
Hmm.
And a big part of why you don't like Mew is you don't like the decisions because you don't like some of the other cards that came out in the same set, Battle VIP Pass and Chromatic, right?
That's true. Yeah, I mean, they really designed that set around Mew, not just the Fusion Strike ones, but Chromatic, Battle VP Pass really work well with Mew. And they work in other things too, some, but they really, there's not a lot of decks that play Chromatic, probably, right? But because of Genesect, you're just the idea of you can just pitch a card is now a good thing, which you normally don't want to just get rid of cards for the sake of
And
getting
it's an
rid of
item
cards.
card as well, which is not something that you almost ever want to get rid of.
Right, yeah. If you could get rid of there's always some Pokemon you don't want, or you can only play one supporter for turn. So if you get rid of those cards, that would actually probably be a better option. But you don't have that. And then VIP Pass, so you can set up and just explode on turn one. The other reason I don't like Mew, well, two, one, it was very dominant at first, and therefore it was very expensive. It's still I don't know the prices now, but it was very expensive, partly because it was the new thing and it was good, but also you need a lot of V and VMAX Pokemon, more so than just about any other deck. You need like 4-3 for Mew, and then you need 4 Genesects, right? So it's very expensive in that regard. A lot of high powered, high cost Pokemon for sure.
Yeah, and then like Lost Zone's completely different in that because almost every set, as I said, has a main like deck, and it's usually really expensive because it's like it just
Hmm.
is a V or a V Max or a V Star. Um, and then something like the Lost Zone, it's all like single prizes, except for like Giratina or Gudra if you want to play those.
Right.
But it's almost all single prizers. And so that's much more affordable and also very different because Mew doesn't play like every other deck, but a lot of the ideas are similar. We just want to do draw through your deck, do big damage through a low process, unlike something like Lost Zone where you do want to do big damage, you do want to draw cards, but you also
Yep.
want to set up like these different conditions of getting cards in the Lost Zone and just doing different things. It's much more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, with Mew, while one can go too far with it, you kind of just turbo through the deck as quickly as you can, is kind of the game plan with the deck. And playing against the deck, it's often not fun because you sit there and the Mew player, if they get 3 or 4 Genesects a turn, and they're discarding and it's searching the deck, it's just, they're very long turns, right? You can get like online, which is quicker than IRL. It can be like 2-3 minute turns. You're just sitting there, just waiting, doing nothing. So that's not enjoyable either. A deck that's designed towards these really long turns. So
Yeah, I mean, Lost Zone does have
it,
long turns as well, and they're also gonna like think. A Mew player is not really gonna think. Mew players don't think, but Lost Zone definitely you have a lot of thought in that because you're like deciding you're making a ton of decisions that are different than any other game because as I said like Close Experiment, Comfy, you look at a set of cards, you need to make a decision based on that set of cards, which is different than probably anything else you've really decided before.
yeah, in Fusion Strike and Mew, it's more high roll than I like. Also, a lot of it is turn one. How many battle VIP passes do they get? Do they flip heads on the Karamatic? If those things hit, they set up and they can be unbeatable. They get a bad turn one, they're in a lot of trouble. If the opponent gets down past the peak, do they have the card to bump it, or again do they flip heads on the Cram-O-Matic so they can get the stadium to bump it. If not, they're just sitting there doing nothing. So it's a deck when it works, it's great, but then it can also just be flat and do nothing. And I like a deck to me that's kind of in the game more consistently.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Um, I think part of why Mew appears inconsistent is because it has the power to push on turn one and do big
Mm-hmm.
damage. Pretty much no other deck in the game does that.
Yeah.
Um, and also it doesn't rely on, well, it relies on Genesect V, which is very vulnerable to Path of the Peak. I think
Mm-hmm.
one thing to note about both these decks is they've caused a rise, not as much Lost Zone because the counters in Empoleon V, but it causes these like unpleasant counters to arise. We've seen Path of the Peak as a counter to Mew, and
Mm-hmm.
Empoleon V as a counter to Genesect, and or as a
To
counter
Lost
to
Zone.
Lost Zone, and both those aren't enjoyable to play against. And then they both are countered by Weezing, which is also not fun to play against. So it's a bit annoying when one deck that has like a weakness that's very common with other
Mm-hmm.
that's like just annoying for other decks. It just creates a bit of an annoying metagame sometimes.
Yeah, well, and Weezing, Inteleon is still a very powerful engine too. So obviously, Ability Lock is very strong. Weezing though doesn't set up well, develop itself very well. Otherwise, it would be a really, I think, a much more dominant deck than it is.
Yeah, I mean it's still certainly borderline top 10 right now, I've got to say.
Yes,
With probably a Eternus.
yeah, yeah, oh yeah, it's a viable choice for sure. I mean, I think Mew is a much more linear deck in it. Lost Zone, you have a lot more ways you can build the deck, and even once you get into the game, you've got to adapt to what your opponent's doing and throwing at you. So I think it's more interesting, right? You have those difficult choices. What are you going to Lost Zone? What are you going to lose permanently? Because all 60 cards in your deck for a reason. So you got to know what you need to do for that turn and what you need to do multiple turns ahead. I think to pilot Lost Zone. So it's a higher skill level deck, I think. And like I said, it's deck building wise, I think it's a lot more interesting. You just have a lot of choices with it. So I think it's a nice mechanic that they added there.
Yeah, I think it's fun. And it's also a mechanic that's existed. It's a
Yeah.
weird mechanic. We've seen a few sets that have had it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's mostly just the same idea where one set has Lost Zone. We saw, I think it was Lost Thunder before, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Call of Legends was the first one, maybe. I don't know if that was
Okay,
the
I'm
first
not
one, but
sure, but
yeah, there are a few sets that have Lost Zone, and they're really interesting sets too, I think. I'm not super familiar, but I think Lost Thunder was a really cool set, and it had like I think one thing to know is Fusion Strike. The set had almost nothing else. Right? It was like pretty garbage set. It was just all the
mm-hmm.
junk that was ignored through the other like three sets of that year. So there are these like it was really big and they had so many like useless cards. And then
Yeah.
what were the good decks? I think there was Inteleon VMAX and Gengar VMAX, and like that
Okay.
was it. Which
Yeah.
are they're both okay, but they're not that
They
good.
were okay, but not great. But yeah, the Fusion Strike set was the international set that took all the bad cards that did from the Japanese earlier releases they hadn't released yet, and they kind of dumped that all in, which also drove up the price of Mew because I think it was a very big set in terms of number of cards, but there were only a few cards that people really wanted.
Yeah, and then like Lost Origin had so many. I mean, the Lost Zone itself opened up a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
decks, including like the basic Sableye, um, Cramorant, and then also stuff like the V Stars, like Giratina V Star, soon, no, sorry, Hisuian Kuta V Star, as well as it had like Hisuian Zoroark V Star, which is a lot of decks from a new set that are all
Mm-hmm.
very, very solid, and I think it just was more interesting. And they like Fusion Strike didn't have much. There was, I think, Let's All Rollout was in that set, but it's pretty like not good. So
Right. Yeah, I mean there were some other options in that set with the Lost Zone things, and I had one of my favorites, Rotom V, which I still is thinks fun to play, although it's not the best deck in the world, obviously.
yeah, I just got logged out. I think
Did you?
from
Okay.
from PTO. So do you think it's about time we wrap up, or do you have anything else to say?
No, I think that covered it pretty well. So I think for both of us, right, we not big fans of the Fusion Strike mechanic in that set, and then Lost Zone, we're our fans. Now, I want a question before we're done. We're rotation's not that long off. We're losing some pieces for both. I'm particularly concerned with Lost Zone and, like, say, the loss of net. How do you think the two mechanics are going to be post rotation?
So Fusion Strike's not losing that much. What's it losing? It's losing like
It's
Quick Ball, right?
it's not losing, right. That one's not losing much. It can basically almost stay the way it is, I think.
Yeah. So I don't think Mew's losing too much, unfortunately. Um, but we are seeing, as you said, Lost Zone is losing Scoop Up Net. That's like the big thing.
Yeah.
It's also losing a few like attackers, but nothing insanely good. I guess like Amazing Quas is good, but it's losing Scoop Up Net. It's like not ideal because you can't go like turbo comfy turn one. You can't do like
Hmm.
a bunch of comfies, and you won't necessarily always be able to cram in turn one, but you still have. And I think we're also losing Switch, but you still got Robe, you still got Switch Cart, so it's not that bad.
Hmm.
Some people I think are a bit scared of it, like it being hurt a lot from rotation, but it's gonna be fine. It's not losing anything that important, so I don't think you should worry about it too much. It'll obviously everything loses something, but I don't think it's getting. I think it's getting hit less than most decks.
Yeah, it could be true. It sounds like from what you said, it may lose a turn though, getting going. Depending with the new things that come out, might put it makes it in a tougher spot.
I'd actually argue. Well, so you're not really familiar with the new stuff, right? Like at
No,
all.
no, I don't worry about that. No.
But so they're EXs, which are like evolutions.
Yeah.
So they're probably slower. So if you lose a turn, it's not a big deal. I think I don't think it's actually going to result in the loss of a turn. I think it's going to result in. Well, I think you'll be attacking with say Cramorant more turns in the early game, which
Okay.
isn't that bad. I think you can still get off the turn one Cramorant though because you can play a bunch of comfies. Your board might be a bit crowded, which isn't ideal.
Hmm.
But like you're gonna play two comfies as opposed to just having one and looping it with net, which isn't even that good. You're burning a lot of resources.
Right.
So I think it's fine. Like yeah, I don't think you're losing like a whole turn. Maybe like half a turn, which is a bit of a weird thing to say, but I think you're losing not too much tempo.
Okay. I mean, I like Lost Zone, so I'd like to see it continue to be in a good place. So for sure. So
Yeah. But I think it's time we end it.
yep.
So this has been the Reasonably Effective podcast. I hope you've all enjoyed listening. Also, if you're presumably watching this on YouTube because I don't think we're putting it on anything else just yet.
No, we
But
got to
we'd be
figure that
really
out.
yeah, and this is on both 10 Types and Uncommon Fossils channel, so you can check it out on either of those. And it'd be really appreciated if you liked, subscribed, and also if you commented down below one like what you thought of this stuff, but also if you want it on another platform, if you know how to put it easily on another platform as well. It seems like a bit of a weird process, but yeah, we hope you've all enjoyed. Anything else you want to say before we send it off?
No, I think it's been a good podcast. Hopefully, people have enjoyed it and have a good week playing Pokemon.
Yep. See ya.